Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at Upper Deck's ProView 3D and SE cards of 93-94. Now these are interesting sets because in 93-94, Upper Deck was creating some additional sets to their main Upper Deck set. Upper Deck had basically made one set. That was all that they made all the way through 1992. And the rest of the hobby basically caught up with them in 1991 by making additional sets to compete at the same level as Upper Deck. And in 1993, there was a big movement to make additional sets, ultra premium sets, for pretty much just about everybody. And Upper Deck started to do that with their SP cards in baseball and in football. They also did SP cards as inserts in hockey. But in basketball, they didn't do their SP set. They actually did something else, which was an experiment for their 94 sets. And it's interesting in that regard. The set that they created was called Upper Deck SE, which stands for Special Edition. And this was their first parallel card set. Parallels had basically been started by Topps in 1992. That's pretty fair to say that. And in 1993, still parallels were basically just a single parallel to the main set. Upper Deck wanted to up the game with creating a two-tier set of parallels. So you have your base card, then you have a parallel, and then you have an additional parallel that's even more difficult to get. So this was basically how they created their SE set. They created it to experiment with this so that they could launch it in the rest of their sets. The SE cards themselves are also kind of a nod to what the 94 cards were going to look like. They did a 3/4 bleed card with a bunch of stuff on the left side, which it got kind of busy. It was difficult to see. I like all the things that they tried to do. I don't think they were very successful with it. And as a result, the whole card kind of gets lost in the mess of different stuff that's in there with nothing standing out very distinctively. As a result of this, you're not likely to notice these SE cards. They're going to be just about every other card from the 93-94 year is going to stand out before you notice this one. That doesn't mean that it's not a card worth checking out, specifically because of the parallels. So on the card front, it's an interesting exploration. On the card back, it's a different kind of exploration that looks more like a specialty set that Upper Deck had been starting to do. And that is basically what this was, but the specialty sets were like Nestle and these little sets. This card set was trying to be a little bit more ambitious, but it truly was an experiment. And the experiment was the parallels. So at the bottom of the main card, there's a little strip of prismatic silver that says Electric Court. That is the base parallel. And this was one per pack. They also did an additional parallel to this where instead of having that little strip of prismatic silver, they have a large, not strip, but large, very thin letters of prismatic gold that say Electric Gold. And then they have an EG symbol over on the right side, which is the symbol that they came up with for it. And then all of the gold foil on the card was replaced with this prismatic gold foil. So the whole card has a very lively quality. It also doesn't really stand out. None of these elements stand out very well. Frankly, the silver Electric Court stands out better than the Electric Gold. But it's a nice experiment that they tried. They made a run at it, and this is why you do an experiment like this. You try to figure out what you need to do in order to make it work. The set also did have two subsets, and the first one was the All-Star Weekend. So they had all these different cards looking at the All-Star Weekend where you got to actually see, among other things, the rookies in their competing in the all-rookie team game. And this is an interesting thing about this set. It was released late enough that they were actually able to make cards of the All-Star Weekend. So you also had slam dunk competition, three-point shooting. It was an interesting affair that they did, and they were able to talk about it. So you got to see not just the rookies in their uniforms, but you got to see them in their rookie team event uniforms as well. So you really got to get a feel for the action, which makes it a very interesting set that you just don't come across very often. They also had another set which is basically a news statement about each team. So every single one of the 27 teams has one of these cards, and it's just some highlight to their season that they had. All of these cards did come with the two parallels. They also did their checklist cards in kind of the way that they'd been doing it, where they had player images on the front and on the back. Now, unlike Ultra, these do not have the same images that were used on the regular card, but they do have some pretty good players. So the first card has Gary Payton and Patrick Ewing. The second one has B.J. Armstrong and Joe Dumars. And the third one has Mookie Blaylock and Lloyd Daniels. Now, Lloyd Daniels it's interesting to see him on the card because at this time he was very popular. And he was popular not because he was a big star, but because everybody was really intrigued by him. So Jerry Tarkanian had become the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. And people were already not too sure about that choice. but he wanted to bring on Lloyd Daniels, who was, let's just say that parents didn't really want you to have a poster of Lloyd Daniels on your wall. He wasn't the most level-headed person in college, and so bringing him in, everybody was kind of curious about how all this was going to work. And Lloyd basically kind of disappeared into the ether, but for a brief window of time, he was popular enough that he could actually make it onto one of these checklists because we cared about him. So if you've never checked out the story of Lloyd Daniels and Jerry Tarkanian, definitely check it out. So this was basically the set. This was how the whole set was built, and it was an interesting little affair, but it wasn't just about the set. They actually did do some specialty cards as well. And the first one was the Michael Jordan retirement card. This is MJR1, Michael Jordan retirement. And on the card front, it has Michael at the press conference, and on the card back, it has him in his baseball uniform. They also did another card that was a really interesting card, and it was the Johnny Kilroy card. And this is basically a nod to what would eventually happen with Leon Sandcastle. So the idea with this was Michael Jordan had retired, and everybody was really unsure about this because it was weird. Michael Jordan basically was the NBA, and all of a sudden he was gone. I mean, just like that, he was gone. And everybody's looking going, really? A guy that competitive? He owns the league. Why would he leave? He's not going to stay away. And over time, we started to notice that he's really getting into this baseball thing. So it really didn't feel right. So Upper Deck decided to make a nod to that by making a spoof card about Michael basically sneaking back into the NBA under the alias of Johnny Kilroy. And so he sneaks onto the Bulls, and really he looks more like Orlando Woolridge in this card. But, you know, I presume that he would have played like Michael Jordan. And so it was a fun little nod to this, and I can't remember if they built anything more out of it, but on the card back it has a whole little story about Johnny Kilroy. So those are the Michael Jordan cards in this set, the retirement card and the Johnny Kilroy card. They also had two trade cards, and the first trade card was for an exchange set for the Dream Team players, and this is both the Dream Team and Dream Team 2 players, which was really kind of cool. So you actually had a set that was very, very unique in the fact that it really had all of these players together. Nobody ever sat down and did all three of the teams, including the 96 team, which would have been really cool, but it also would have meant that there'd be a lot of players who would have had repeat cards. So it'd be kind of interesting. But in this case, all of the players were unique across the two teams. So it was that last set of the Dream Team, and it was an interesting set of Dream Team 2. They also did an exchange card for what was called Behind the Glass, and this set was all etched metal. It's what they were doing in SP, at least with football. And so these cards are extremely lively, which makes it a little bit difficult to see the player image. He's just glossy with the liveliness around, but it's still a really cool card. And the whole card set it's kind of rare, but it was a really neat set that they did as well. So that was Upper Deck SE. That's everything they did. It was a big experiment for 94 Upper Deck. It was the replacement for SP for basketball. But that wasn't the only thing that they did in 93-94. Upper Deck also kind of wanted to play around a bit and experiment with 3D, which is a really unusual thing to say about Upper Deck because they're all about holograms. But they wanted to play around a little bit more with some fun things to do. So they decided to, instead of just doing holograms, to look at 3D with those classic 1950s red and blue glasses. And the cards that they created used the red-blue shift to create some actually pretty decent 3D. And in case you're worried about not having any glasses, every single pack came with a set of glasses in it. It's a remarkable waste of dead dinosaurs. But it meant that you could buy just one pack and you could still view the card in 3D. So it was a cool little trick that they played. And the cards are a neat gimmick. They are well designed. The way that the space works in the card actually works pretty decently. This is not the kind of thing you're going to do 2 times, but doing it 1 time was pretty neat. And the card set did have a couple of subsets. Now for the veteran players, the 3D Jam subset is a repeat of the players showing up again. Now as for the rookies, they either come as the 3D rookies or as the Playground Legends. So they come in one form or the other. But they do have the subset of the 3D Jams, which is a duplicate of the veteran players. And all the card backs look, they look like those specialty cards that Upper Deck was making. They weren't done very professionally. But it was all about the 3D, and all of the cards came in the 3D form with the exception of the 2 checklists. Now the two checklists are basically two halves of a picture of Michael Jordan dunking on two guys with the 3D glasses. It's an interesting idea that they did. It's a cool card. It is not 3D. Ironically, if you flip it over, because of the way that the two sides have to line up, the checklists are backwards when you line them up on the back, which I get a kick out of that, but that's what they did. But also, they didn't just do the 3D of the cards, they also did 3D of the box bottom. So the box bottom is a larger version of the Michael Jordan card, and the 3D effect does work on it as well. So that was 3D ProView, and that was an interesting little thing that Upper Deck did in 93, 94. It's not a lot that they did, but they were really playing around with some fun ideas here. And they really wouldn't do this very much in the future. Usually in the future, what they were able to do was to do some really high quality sets. They knew what they were doing. They actually rarely made mistakes, but here it was just playing around. It was having fun, and that's what's really cool about these sets. If you haven't had a chance to check these out, certainly do so. They're very unique cards, and this is saying a lot considering the 1990s was a very unique time, but these cards are very unusual. So that is what these sets are. I hope that you learned something in this video. Definitely let me know in the comments below what you think about these cards. They are a lot of fun, and if you haven't subscribed already, do so. Check out the other videos I've done, and thank you very much for watching.